Next on the list is she is with the consumer. Thanks for having me. My name is Newsome. I'm the Assistant School Director for the Parks and Recreation Department here at Evansville. And today I'm here to speak to you about a program that we started last year. Sports, backyard games, arts and crafts, music and dancing, and whatnot. So we started this last year, right in July, and it was the fall, and we're back again this year. We're actually on the second week. So we are going around every Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 3 o'clock. We were at TP Park today. So on Tuesday, we will be at Powell Park, and then the following Thursday is Fulton Park. So I have some information about it. I'm going to hand it out, but I think I don't know here, so I'm going to print somewhere off. But there's a table out there that will have flyers, just general information about what the program is, kind of like where we're going to go with the program, as well as my business card in case you guys have any questions. So basically, we're just looking for ways to communicate to the neighborhoods. That seems to be kind of the struggle we have is being really important to the area where we are located. So if you guys can help us out, that would be great.
What time are you going to be now?
1:30. Yeah, so we'll be right around the pool area. I'll put golf over there as well, so we're going to try to coordinate with them. We're figuring out how to the pool's there, and then by where the basketball court is where we're going to be located. So just come find us. Basically, one of our banners set up, and we'll see them.
I know what you do in food boxes too. Is it food boxes of free food for the neighborhood or during this time?
That would probably be Evansville. We're going to coordinate with them on being there for some of their events, but we just specifically just do activities. In addition, tomorrow we are going to be at North Main Street for the old Main Street. The city church is doing free hot dogs and burgers, so we're going to be set up there for activities for those students. Any questions?
And now for our main event, the Vanderburgh County Prosecutor, Hermann.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Everybody hear me okay? If not, it's not that interesting. First, thanks for having me. Thanks for being here in person. It's been a long year and a half, looking at people on a little computer screen. So thanks for being here. My name is Hermann. I'm the Vanderburgh County Prosecutor. I've been in that role for about 10 and a half years now. Wanted to give you just kind of a little summary of our office and some of the things we do, and then what I'd like to do is open it up to questions. At the end of the day, I can stand up here and talk for the next couple hours, but I don't know that you find that particularly rewarding. So our office is in the Civic Center, and we have 75 to 80 employees on any given day. It's a very large office. Everybody knows that we prosecute crime. That's probably our most popular function, but we do a lot of other things as well. We represent the state of Indiana in all felony, misdemeanor cases and infractions. We have an adult protective services unit, which is a hub for all of southwestern Indiana, and we service all of the counties of southwestern Indiana with regard to that. We have a large child support office We have about 9,500 child support cases that we monitor, and we collect, I think it's $19, $20 million a year in that regard. We also work very closely with the courts on several different treatment courts, including drug court, forensic conversion, mental health court, veterans court, those types of things. We participate in those. We have several programs within our office. If you have gotten pulled over that ticket, you know about our infraction referral program, where you can get that dismissed. We also have a pre-trial diversion program for both felonies and misdemeanors for first-time offenders, which basically amounts to some community service and possible drug tests or other things that happen on a given case that can also lead to dismissal. We prosecute somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3,000 felonies a year, 6,500 misdemeanors, and infractions. I think we were around 11,000 last year. So we're a high volume office. We have a large victim assistance unit. I always tell people that the criminal justice system revolves around the criminal. There's a long list of rights for criminals, everything in the system set up to cater to that individual. And a lot of times victims feel like they get left out. And so that's an important part of what our office does, is try to fill that gap. Just because you're a victim of crime doesn't mean you know what's going on in the court system, or that you have a law degree, or that you understand what the judge is saying. So they kind of stand in there and help interpret and give guidance to the victims. We work very closely with a lot of agencies in town, obviously Albion, Holly's House, Lamping Center, all of those types of agencies that assist and help victims. We also work with basically every law enforcement agency that you can think of. Obviously, the Evansville Police Department, Vanderburgh County Sheriff's Office, work with the Attorney General's Office, Secretary of State's Office, Treasurer's Office, the State Board of Accounts, Secret Service, FBI, DEA. If there's an acronym, we've got somebody in our office working with it. That's just kind of how broad, how many different things that we touch. We've had some new developments in the last year and a half. We started a cell phone forensics lab to go after some of the electronic data that's out there. These little things know everything about you. In fact, they probably know you better than you know yourself. They know where you're going, where you've been, who you talked to, what you said, all those types of things. And so we started a unit to go after that type of evidence. We also obviously have to deal with all of the electronic evidence that's now coming from the police department and the sheriff's office with regard to body cams. It's you see a lot of politicians on TV say, "Hey, let's get body cams." There's a lot to that. Obviously, you've got to have good equipment and good cameras, but then it's a storage nightmare. It's an accounting nightmare to try to figure out, where's the video from this run, time of day, the officers that are there. That's taken a huge part of the sheriff's office and the police department and our office, trying to keep all that straight. The good news is that it's really good evidence. Anytime that you can get video of a scene, anytime you can get video of a crime, that leads to a speedy resolution, because it's not usually a lot of fighting back and forth about what happened. So that's been helpful too. Want to touch on a couple of other things. Our courts, everybody always says courts are backed up. I think that's kind of just the default, but obviously through this coronavirus, we weren't able to have as many trials as we normally would have. So that backed us up a little bit. But I think it also led to the resolution of a lot of cases. I think we got a lot of things moved, but it did back us up on some of your bigger cases, your murder trials, and those types of things that typically don't lead, that you typically have to try. So we're in the middle of a big run of those over from the last couple of years. What else? Jail overcrowding. Our jail's been overcrowded since it's down here. It was overcrowded the first day that they moved in out in Harlan. And that really hasn't changed. But there have been some changes that have helped and hurt. A few years ago, the legislature rewrote the criminal code, And it used to be that you only stayed in the local tax jail if you were away from having a conviction. Then it went to if you were convicted of misdemeanor, then you're local tax jail. Now it's expanded to the 6 felonies that are local. And also, years ago, I don't think those stats, but we certainly need to address that across the board. As far as crime is always interesting to talk about because there's a couple different things that matter. One is statistics, and then the other is perception. And I'll give you an example of how wrong each one of them can be. When I first ran in 2010, I had no idea. 10 years ago, picked up a newspaper across the news, and we're seeing houses flood. We're seeing houses flood. And you notice you'll see that. That has dropped off the last 5, 6, 7 years. Nothing. You never hear about that. And if you go back and look at the stats, we let the state. We're one of the highest populations of meth labs in the country. And then they disappeared. Right? For the next few years, what happened? I wish I could tell you that one of these programs that was being run by somebody, and people got off drugs and it all stopped. Amphetamine before it came from here, and it's cheaper, and you get it large quantity, and so 16 years ago, basically gone away. But the amount of methamphetamine that we take off the streets has gone to the road, and you guys, Brian, didn't really know it because you don't see it on the front page. You don't see it. It's you can play with the stats. Crime is obviously up, right? I mean, if you look around the country, if you watch the news, crime's up. Look at the stats, crime's down. Why is that? Because during coronavirus, every agency in the country started to take measures of not coming in contact with so many people, not getting out of their cars, unless whatever the rules were. And so the actual number of arrests and all those types of things nationwide went down. But at the same time, you saw cities burning down. You saw areas, what was the one in Seattle where they just had a couple blocks and they said, we won't send the police there? That worked out really well. Gave that up after a while, thank God. But, so sometimes you see a police agency trying to root out a problem and try to be more aggressive and arrest them. And then everybody thinks crime's coming up, and it's actually quite the opposite. So anytime you see something like that, just be careful and look into the numbers and talk to people, talk to your police officer, talk to your sheriff's deputy when you run into them and ask them for that. The last few years have been, I don't think interesting is the word, but you've seen the sentiment against law. You've seen sentiment that law enforcement bad all of a sudden, and that we need to fund them, we need to do all those types of things. And I don't know, I mean, that's obviously a political line for somebody up to take advantage, but it's a horrible, it's a horrible thing to have this trust of the people that are paid to protect or that are paid with their lives and nature to do that. And so that's something that I've seen in the last few years. I don't know how you work. And I don't want to get into political arguments back and forth and all that type of thing, but either respect people doing that job or you don't. And I think that maybe there's some grievances out there that people may have in certain cases, in certain situations, that's fine. But I think that the level to which that hatred has risen in the last few years is detrimental. I don't want to see a lot. I would rather have at the same time, when I keep them, when somebody's breaking into my house, and somebody's doing something to hurt my family members or somebody in my neighborhood, I want them there, I want them to do that. And so I think we've got, when law enforcement becomes a political punching bag back and forth between political parties and candidates, I think that's horrible. The other thing that it's had an effect on is recruitment. I'm not here on the sheriff's department or the police department, but I can tell you that the number of recruits that they're getting is not your number. If you go back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and ask how many people that have applied versus how many people that have applied now, the number of companies. And we need good people on recruitment, and we need good applicants, and we need people. And I think a lot of this happens in going to body cams. I mean, these have body cams, sheriff's departments have body cams. Push body cams. Well, it's not great because if I pull a gun out, you can't see. If I put a jacket on over it, forget about it. You can't see. If you ask me to pick a spot, they make them on glasses, and that way you turn your police officer turns their head or whatever, they can see where the police officer is. But they're not going to wear glasses. What if they get knocked off? I don't know that there's a perfect spot. Having a camera is something obvious. But there are a lot of cases too where unless we start putting people with 50 cameras around them, I don't know how we're going to do. But I do think that is somewhat of a positive in a lot of cases. I know cut down on a lot of complaints against law enforcement officers because all of a sudden you play on somebody that just took a little video, take a look at it. Believe it or not, you buy about qualifications for the police. So I think it's been helpful there. And with cases for the police, right? We have a case coming up. And I think I haven't seen one that's really helpful. All that type of stuff. And basically, all of the action after the original firing on that. I think making progress in those. In fact, in that one, they use you see when you watch it. Believe it or not, the crime doesn't occur, everybody gets solved, and we have all this great evidence within 45 minutes of time. But the technology that we do have, I think, is getting better. And we're also very fortunate because we have so many tools with not just our local agencies, but federal agencies, and everybody seems to work together really well. I'm not supposed to try to include potential murders, but I will say this: we need new doctors. We need good people on juries that have common sense that can apply life experience. So you get your jury notice and says, "Come on down." I know you don't want to, but come down. Maybe we're lucky enough to make $30 or $35 a day. We lock the rooms are going to free, but the most important people in the education process of the flow. Our job and simply to the evidence, videos, testimony. say, well, what do I have? Well, you have life. Like I said, saying what your experiences in life. We need people that know what it's like to get up and go to bed or go to work in the morning, to interact with people that have been on drugs, interact with people that's maybe got somebody in your family or a friend that is on domestic violence techniques. We need people like that. Tell you when things are going to happen. We get a lot more drug crimes this spring when police officers start putting their windows down in their cars and start smelling certain stuff. Down their houses. We find domestic violence that occurs when it starts to cool off. Well, this whole coronavirus a little bit ago, because a lot of people are at home all the time. That's very difficult to deal with by its own very nature. There's some type of relationship. I mean, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, daughter, whatever it is, there's some type of relationship. And generally speaking, you love it. When they're sober, not being on you, those types of things. And then something escalates, an argument escalates, usually involving drugs or alcohol. That then goes, and then you call the police, and the police come out and they separate. And then a day or two later, you realize I'm the reason, and so and so's in trouble. I'm the reason, and so and so's in jail. And now they're sober, and now they're following you, and those types of things. Those cases are very hard to work through. Patients that are involved here. Another very difficult case we deal with is child sex crimes and sexual assault. In particular, I was but I think it's something that statistics are that one in four women, 1 in 7 men be sexually abused in their home. That's what women, 1 in 7 men. That's incredibly high number. And the other thing people don't typically know is that locally, 85 to 90%. And a large percentage of them, they're a friend of theirs. It's existing. It's been a little bit weird last year for everybody, but particularly for our office. We cut off. We've done a lot of things. You know, it's not, when you look at, range of about 70. And, you know, together in looser. When I think of a gang, I think of an organization that you join, that you're with for life, you never leave, those types of things. And we do have some of those people that float in and out, but our problem deals more with usually young combat, some of those that are that loosely get together. One month or 1 year, the big group of 15 or 20 of them, and then the next time you look, 5 of them are over here, 5 of them are over here. But there'll be these groups, and some of them go out and steal things. A lot of them go out and use drugs, deal drugs, sell drugs. We have a horrible problem in this community with young children. Because if I have a record, if I'm a convicted felon, I probably shouldn't have a gun. I do. So, 16-year-old kid with me, and then when the police come, here you go. And now all of a sudden you got a juvenile with a gun. And so we do have a lot of that going on as well, because we know that little brother, that I'm going to go to prison if I get caught with it. So little brother, cousin, but why that, or why do we see that? I think we see it for a sense of protection. I think we see it as some belonging. Like, you know, a lot of these kids don't have not a knock on single fathers, but you know, the fatherly influence. We see over and over again. The biological father, stepfather, an uncle, whoever. A lot of these kids are missing, male role models, and then some of them just get mixed up in their own crowd. I was an organic chemistry major in college. I consider myself fortunate because I was good at making powders, good at making drugs, and good at making, you know, I made drugs and work and those types of things. But you know. But the grace of God, you know, maybe I've been the other way too. I don't know. I didn't come up and, you know, so I don't know how people end up sometimes in situations. I mean, we've all made mistakes, we've all done things that all of a sudden have to and you know, that's tough. We have seen, I think, a progression. You know, we went from having no diversion programs, no anything. So now we have so many programs to deal with mental health, to deal with drugs, to deal with people that just make stupid decisions. How that come on the front end. After a period of time, you can go back and you can have that seed. You can have that. It's not exactly raised, but you know, basically sealed, so it's not found on background checks and those types of things. You commit more crimes, it goes back on you, but if you stay on the narrow, and I think in a lot of cases that's 40s, but, in early 20s now, turn their life around, they've got a family, they've gone to school, they've got good jobs, and can't take a test from them, really can't get this license because they got don't know all the time that particularly I don't know, you know, you have to kind of watch that can go a little bit hard, but I think that has been a good thing overall. I'm not taking up the criminal recovery practice. Earlier, it's in levels. Overcrowded jail. The jail was supposed to be after sentence. So the Department of Corrections, I was on, did a good job. Anger management class. And quite frankly, a little bit for making efforts to try to build that. Going forward, but we started that anonymous tip line 24/7. You can call and that's worked very well. It helps get information to law enforcement. Anonymous, but it can help you find someone help you find information. So that's been very successful. I think a lot of that is all you that you want. How did I know? Question right there.
Like about 2 years ago, 2 years ago, I was asked to do jury duty, and I was doing real good, answering the questions until they asked me that I know you, and they dismissed me.
I'm going to go to the next question, and it has to do with the comment that you made about defunding the police. My take on it is a little bit different than yours. Mine is more what resources can be put against situations where people have mental or emotional issues that need to be addressed on a regular basis, and even these abuse cases, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend situations. Are the police referring any of these situations to other organizations? And the reason I bring up the defund the police, I think that's a kind of a hot button issue, but moving from the police is really for those programs. Yes, they didn't understand the directions or whatever. I can understand where that can happen. That they can officers can feel threatened. The person who has been called about doesn't know how to respond. Is your office or are the police referring these particular situations to another organization to help them maybe kind of stay focused, or at least keep track of them, or know that whenever a call is made for an individual that's had multiple calls, that they know what this is about, that they know that this person does have issues, so they know how to handle it differently.
I think it's now yes, no questions, right? I mean, that's a couple things, and I'll come back to you, see if I hit it all. I don't think there's any replacement for trying to get guns and drugs off the street for traffic enforcement and people coming in contact. And we have had a drop off over the last several years due to staffing, also due to specialty units and getting pulled different things. So I think number one, to address those things, that would be one of the things I'd look to if I were chief of police or sheriff. Mental health, I mean, you're 100% right. There is, and I don't know if anybody here works in mental health. I don't know. And so I don't mean this any disrespect. We don't have mental health care in our society, period. We have, we're lucky enough to have a state hospital here in Evansville that it takes an act of God and 50 other people sign off on getting anybody in. So I don't want to say you forget it, but I mean, there's just not enough beds. There's not enough beds in the state of Indiana for mental health. There's certainly not enough here. I have big concerns when we go back and talk about the number of one-pot meth labs, little kids who are running around in those, and all the societal factors that I think may play into a rise in mental health going forward as well. That being said, people that do it, I think do a valiant job with very limited budgets. But we do, both the police and sheriff's department, they train their officers now, and they have crisis intervention teams. They are trained to recognize and deal with some of those things, because there is a difference. You can be dangerous with mental health. I mean, you can be dangerous without it, but there is a difference, and being able to identify those and work with those. There's an alarming number of people with mental health problems at Vanderburgh County Jail. I'll tell you that. I'm sure the sheriff were here, he'd tell you the exact same thing. And the reason is there's nowhere else to go with them, and we've made some strides. We have a mental health court, but there are a lot of stipulations to that. You have to willingly go on it. For example, a lot of people with severe mental health problems are not going to. For those of you that are lucky enough not to have any idea of what we're talking about, or not to know what mental health is, there are people that have, for whatever reason, I'm not a doctor, chemical imbalances or genetic predispositions, or whatever it is that takes you in that direction. And there are some very powerful and some very good drugs that can help some of them. And when they get them on those drugs, some of them can stabilize, some can get back home, some of them can lead normal lives. But some of those drugs also have a lot of side effects. Maybe a common complaint I get is it makes my head fuzzy, or it feels cloudy, or I don't sleep right, or those types of things that you have to want to get off of. And anytime that you get on the pills and get off the pills and get on the pills and get off the pills, it makes it worse. And so there are very high functioning people with mental health issues. I think you could argue that probably everybody has some type of mental health issue, but that is something police officers now have to be able to identify mental health. They have to be able to administer Narcan. They have to be able to provide some type of medical response. Not near the medical response the fire does. I don't know. Most people. It is. And it gets but it very quickly cross the line. The most tragic case that I'm aware of involved a gentleman who was having suicidal thoughts and issues, and he called 911 himself. And they responded appropriately, and they went out and they were doing the CIT and all this stuff. Then he ended up punching an officer, and then he got taken to jail, and then he ended up kicking somebody. I think he broke the jaw. There ended up being 3 or 4 violent things that happened as a result of this isolated mental health issue. And so it becomes a very, very difficult thing that I can tell you. that as a criminal justice system, we probably don't have any real business being involved with. I mean, that needs to be addressed by people that are properly trained in that. But it's a situation where the police, sheriff's department, fire department, AMR, that's who you call. You know, that's who's answering for 911. So is there a need for mental health? Absolutely. Is there a need for more group homes? Is there a need for state hospital beds? Absolutely. And that ultimately, I think, comes from a state funding issue and an initiative that the state says we're going to put money behind this. But every time you get a new state hospital, every time you get a new state hospital building, its capacity is lower than the one that they're tearing down. And it makes no sense to me. But I think you're absolutely right in that. And that's become one of the, if there's been a job change in our office, that's been a thing that the deputy prosecutors really had to work with, because we have drug addictions, we have mental health, we have people that commit crimes because they're trying to feed their kids, or because they're under the control of a drug dealer, or a bad spouse, or those types of things. And so you can end up in these horrible situations. I know a lady that was an intravenous drug user, and she went and got her own drugs and used them, because if she did it, her husband, who was an intravenous drug user, would take his dirty needles and whatever he bought off the street and inject her. So you can end up in these horrible situations that you can't figure a way out of. And I think as a society, we owe it to these people to provide them with a path and an avenue to do that. With that being said, if you look at the success rate of a drug treatment program or something like that, the success rates aren't very high. That doesn't mean that they're not worthwhile, because all of those people are worth something and worth trying to want to get out, get the kids back, get jobs, and do the right thing. It's worth it, but there is no magic bullet that solves 100% of those cases.
Really appreciate you taking the time to answer. I would also like to ask that you keep in mind that whenever you say defund the police, that's not exactly what it's about. It's really about the programs and that you tried to explain. So, there's a need for it. And I think
we have money. We're getting ready to refund tax money. So there's money there. I'll give you another example. I'm the guy on these committees statewide, and I'm the guy they call when normal diplomatic things have been lost, and they somebody throw it. So that's my job. And so we were trying to get funding for adult protective services. This was 4 or 5 years ago. It's not better now. And so I was the one that delivered the message that Marion County Animal Control was funded at a higher level than adult protective services for the state of Indiana. And adult protective services saw a lot more voters than Marion County Animal Control. So I went in and let all of our legislators and governors all know that. We got a little bit of a bump, enough, but you can always talk about funding and look at different things, but I just think we need to move forward together in any way that we can. And I think my concern, and I don't, like I said, don't want to get political with the defund, but it's gotten very divisive. Everything's divisive, right? Some people even cheer for that Kentucky Wildcats team. It's horrible. But you pick anything and people immediately pick sides. And what we really need is we need to come together and move forward.
How's our recidivism rate versus the rest of the state or versus the national average? How do we do it?
Keep something asking about stats, right? Recidivism rate is a particularly difficult stat to look at, because everybody that figures it a different way. Recidivism is how many times somebody recommits or recommits something. The Department of Corrections looks at recidivism as how likely are you that you come back to the Department of Corrections. I just told you that the large majority of our felonies, the misdemeanors, you go back to local county jail, so that's gone down since they rewrote the code. But that actually hasn't stopped. I think I'll answer it this way. It depends on the position that you're in when you come forward. If you're a first-time offender and you screwed up and you made a mistake and you recognize that and you're embarrassed and you're worried about it, you don't want people to know, then chances are you're not committing another crime, right? But if you come in and you've got 20 or 30 felonies, if you've been doing this for decades, then there's probably not a whole lot that's going to reverse. Not to say that didn't happen, but I think that has a lot to do with it, and then also the amount of resources we put into it. I think anytime you have a sustained effort, drug court takes a year and a half, 2 years. You know, you have people involved in your life, interest in your life, our anger management programs, the domestic violence type things. I mean, they take almost a year for people to successfully go through them. And I think that's enough time that you can change your life. I mean, you can walk out of this building today and change your life, don't get me wrong, but I think the more resources and the longer we can be involved, and not the prosecutor's office or the police, but you know, a treatment facility or whoever, I think our success rates go up. I mean, it's not rocket science. We know what people need, but at the same time, you also have to look at where they're at. I used to do juvenile drug court, and the number of those kids turn in their reports, and everybody in their family uses drugs, everybody that they know at school, and everybody that we can keep them clean on a program, testing them, and for 6 months, 3 months, what do you think's going to happen when they go home and they get out? You know, they're in a situation. But if you're asking, what's the best way to make sure somebody doesn't recommit, it's provide them with long-term resources, and then a situation where they have a support system and you're not putting them back into the same situation that they were in. I get calls a lot, people that their kids are doing drugs, they're worried about them overdosing. We have a lot of overdose deaths. It's a very underreported stat here locally. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it's horrible. And if you don't know someone that overdosed or somebody whose kid overdosed, you probably just don't know about it. There's probably somebody there because it is every demographic, every neighborhood, all town. And my advice to people is always try to intervene early. One of the problems that family members have is you always want to assume that your family's doing the right thing, right? You know, they just seem a little bit off today, or they seem a little bit tired. So we don't always identify very quickly people that are close to us. And then drug abuse can be very alienating. When you're known as the person who's using drugs, then your friends who are using drugs aren't going to hang out with you. Your family members who aren't using drugs aren't going to hang out with you. And all of a sudden, the only people that hang out with you are people using drugs. And you have to reverse that trend. You have to provide good, sober people. One of the programs I like in town is Churches Embracing Offenders. You know, they build a support system around people. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to recidivate, but I think it dramatically lowers the likelihood.
Yeah, I don't need that.
He really does.
No, I don't need that. I was watching CNN today, and I see where Biden has came up with a task force where he was sending these groups across the country, studying on how guns are getting back into areas where they're coming from. And I noticed here in Evansville, I've always brought this up, but it seems like they kind of kicking it underneath the rug. It used to be when a gun went through the system, the judge would order the gun destroyed. But now they take the guns and they sell them to gun dealers in New Albany and Jeffersonville, Indiana, which put these same guns right back on the street. So it's like creating your own monsters. And I've seen where it's been about a little over a month where Chicago was suing Indiana because most of the guns that were used in robberies and crime in Chicago was coming from Indiana.
We're born in Indiana, but made in Illinois, but okay, go ahead.
Well, it seems like with the money that the police department get, all the weapons that they have, thanks to our President Obama, why would they have to continue to put these guns back into, into the society? How would you feel if somebody in your family got killed with a gun that was used in a robbery 5 or 6 years ago, which should have been destroyed?
I'll tell you like it is. There's not a shortage of guns in the United States, and I think anybody that thinks that regardless of what we do, that we can make there be a shortage is wrong. It's easy to find guns. There are plenty of guns. I always tell people, if you need a gun, go down to the courthouse during the day when everybody goes into their court and walk out in the bushes out front, and you probably find one. I don't know. We're to the point where there's so many guns in this country. I don't know that limiting them is going to help anything. To be honest with you, you can go back and forth again. You look at things like gun buyback programs, right? I mean, there are cities that try gun buyback programs where they'll give you a gift card or they'll give you money or whatever for bringing a gun. Then you have studies that show that helps. And then you'll have a study that says, well, they're not bringing you good guns, right? They're bringing you 2 guns. They're bringing you guns that don't work, that are old guns, so then they just tell whatever you gave you, so you buy a new gun. Or if you're really running a bad program and you're not tracing the guns to find out if they've been used in crimes, you're getting guns that have been used in crimes because now I just got rid of them. So, I mean, you can go back. What is the answer to gun violence? What is the answer? I mean, doing this, if I knew that, I'd be my own rocket off up in space. I don't billionaires, I guess, but no, we don't have a great answer. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to address that person, likely that teenager, that 20-something, and you've got to build a community around. The biggest thing that I see generationally is I have my mom's mom is 97. She's not home anymore, but when she was, she knew every one of her neighbors. She knew where they worked, what time they went to work, what time they get home, what the kids' names were, whatever. We don't have those relationships anymore. I mean, some of you may know your neighbors, but most of us don't. We sure don't know their kids. We sure don't know when they come and go. She was the ultimate nosy neighbor. I don't know how she looked out every window at the same time. She would call you if the garage door was open, whatever it was. And now we have these isolated lives where we've got 10,000 friends on Facebook, but we don't know the guy that lives next door to us. I mean, we have, as a society, for whatever reason, isolated ourselves so much that, I mean, it's nice to say that you care about your neighbor, but do you do anything about it? I know you do, Fred, but I mean, just generally speaking, does anybody do that anymore? And I think overwhelmingly the answer is no, not really. And so if you want to help, find somebody and mentor, find somebody and be a part of their life. They can be your family member, they can be your neighbor. Find a young kid, find somebody that's struggling and help them out. That's what I think ultimately we need to do.
Also, you always say, if you see something, say something. There's a guy that I have reported in our area. I know he's got 20 or 30 guns in his house. Plus, he has a mental problem. He's on all kind of medication.
And I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about. Nothing's never been done. Never been done. Excuse me, I just got over pneumonia. He has several warrants out on him. Police know about it. Nothing's never been done. And I was just wondering, is it because of his family background, or would that have something to do with it, you think?
Well, I don't run the police department right here in the city, so I don't run the police department, but I would think if you call the police department and let you know that somebody's there with a warrants, they should do something.
They know, they've been told.
Doesn't do anything. I know you have other numbers of other people.
They've been told, but nothing. It's just gotta keep them in the road.
Good question.
because we have a population of African American, especially young men, the content involved. What is the diversity of your staff working with the, I know it can't be one-on-one, but working with young people like that? I know we have a group now called the Southern Indiana. That's what I'm saying, trying to work with young black males. What is your staff and what is the percentage of that you have on your staff that can relate one-on-one to friendly young folks?
Well, the truth is not very good. And there's a couple different reasons. Our staff, well, I take that back. You separate it. We have our staff and then we have our attorneys, right? And so our staff is pretty representative. Our attorneys are not. And the reason is that we have a very difficult problem in this community getting African-American attorneys. There's not very many of them. And when they do, I think we have a hard time retaining a lot of young kids anyway, but when you come back to Evansville, it's difficult for us to get them. I'll tell a story. I don't think you mind. I got a call a few years ago from Reverend Brooks. He had an individual that was coming back to town and just graduated from law school. Hey, can he come down to your office? Can he shadow? I said, that's great. You know, be happy to have him, bring him on down. Next day or two later, he called and he said, oh, by the way, he's not going to be available Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock. And I said, well, that doesn't help me very much. Barry Plastics found him and offered him an internship that paid better than my deputy prosecutor. So, you know, it's kind of like, well, I mean, I'd like to have this guy, I'd like to have him here. But I think we get run over, you know, we work for government and government doesn't pay that great, be honest with you. And so when everybody in the world is trying to diversify the workforce, the ones that pay double or triple what we make usually tend to be the ones that draw. And so that's been a struggle. We don't even have, trying to think of African-American defense attorneys. We have Fidelski Miller, Yvonne Carter, Tanisha. I think that's it. I mean, the number of African-American attorneys in town is not very high. And when there are African-American attorneys, they get job offers at large companies. Probation officers are actually under the judges. Judge Niemeyer has juvenile probation, and Judge Kiley out of circuit court has the adult probation officers, and then Judge Pigman kind of oversees misdemeanor, and so there's misdemeanor probation officers there.
I have a question, but I don't need the microphone. Are you going to stick around afterwards? Because I want to ask you about 2 cases.
I would love to answer your questions about 2 cases.
Okay, but yes or no?
I will tell you this, my wife's out of town, my son's basketball practice.
Okay, so let's.
I will pull you out in the hallway immediately after.
Okay, well, I have to do something, but quickly, why do we have double? Now, this may be a police issue, but I'm suspicious that the prosecutor does have input. We have double-digit unsolved murder cases in the city, double-digit in the last 18 months to 2 years. The list of unsolved murders here is, and I will tell you, I will caution you, I know from recent statistics, our crime numbers are not that far from Gary's, so don't be dumping on Gary. But no, really, seriously. But why do we have so many unsolved murders? It's something like 15 or 16.
In order to prosecute those cases, in order to make an arrest for the police, all those things, you have to have witnesses. And we have some of these murders that have occurred in neighborhoods in front of 40 and 50 people, 40 or 50 people who did not get them.
I know it hasn't worked out well. So do you think maybe, you don't have to go into a lot of detail. Do you think perhaps it is the avenue of outreach? I mean, I think there's a trust issue here that perhaps if there were another method of seeking information, that perhaps that would work better than this qualitative line of comments.
No, I think that would certainly help, but it goes back to kind of what I said earlier. A lot of those things have failed. And I'll point to one particular, don't know what the headline, I think it says church is failing, but when we have a community where not as many people run a church and there's not as much influence from the people, we used to have a lot of pastors that could help get information and that type of thing. And we still have a lot to try. But there's a lot of the community that they don't have contact with. But that's an example of an outreach that I think has worked very, very effectively. In fact, they could. I know that there are people that go out and go door to door. I know that certain churches have tried. I know that there are community outreaches, that there have been a lot of different efforts. And I think that any effort's a good effort to get out there. But there is, like you said, a mistrust, a broken line of communication.
And it goes back to what he was referring to. Relationships between the community and the police department are a two-way street. And it is, it's a two-way street, and it's a good, healthy community, safe community. There's good people. But so let's move on. I'll ask you about the two cases. I was on the Cully jury trial in December of 2019. Have they retried that? Okay, well, I'll just tell you that we had another jury in Western. I would be surprised. I would just caution you, don't retry it with the same evidence. I was surprised, really. It wasn't even close. There was not ever going to be a conviction on eyewitnesses that gave a different account. The defendant, the shooter had tattoos all over his arms. The defendant's arms were as clean as mine. But the other one is, you probably haven't forgotten about Eric Schmidt. So you did not make a recommendation in his early days on his murder case. Correct. That's correct, right?
I would have.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, since he was released early from prison after serving only 14 years, and recently has not been a good boy, and has not been doing the things he was supposed to do. I understand from the Posey County community. But week before last, 2 weeks ago, he got arrested in Princeton and put in jail for attempting to assault and breaking in and trying to do bad things to his ex-wife.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this was a murder case in which the victim's family advocated her.
I think
And what we did was we stayed silent in that.
in reflection, how do you feel about it?
I was against it at the time.
Thank you, because I've been gunning for you since it happened. That was wrong.
I was against it at the time, but at the end of the day, anytime that you
I
have-
know that, well, you started religious, and I understand how it happened, but sometimes, that was a bad dude way to happen before it happened.
I agree.
And so anyway, will you have any input on what happens to the Gibson County?
I don't know how much he can, but it's good to kind of.
Well, I'm not, I just.
I'm glad to have the right case, but that was a case where it was something that we really struggled with, because normally we just object to all of it, right? Particularly with that egregious offense, the victim's family was very happy.
Well, I will tell you. You've got a lot of critics in Posey County, and a lot of people that know. Thank you.
Yes, I'm asking for a friend, so okay.
So last category of converters.
There's been a. Where are they being sold? Is that what you're asking? In Indiana, to sell a catalytic converter, you have to have registration, I believe. And so they're being sold no. Oh, I just read that. Yeah, you have to have a title. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Really? And it's still.
So they're being sold. They're being sold no.
I think that wraps up the questions for tonight. Thank you so much.
And I'm not trying to be rude, but I gotta go pick my kid up.
Okay, the weeds line is 436-7979 or 1-800-78-CRIME. One good way to bring down crime in Evansville is to give discreet and immediate information. Calling the meeting back to order now. Calling the meeting back to order.
She said, call it.
Well, I was saying, shut up, right?
Oh, stop.
All right, so again, the weed tip line is 800-78-CRIME, 436-7979. Use the weed tip line, the more information that they have, the lower, it's just the lower the crime rate, also good for your neighbors. We have a few announcements. Worship on the Block is going on July 24th at Pottersville between noon to 4. There will be barbecue, live music, and kids activities. For any more questions, talk to Leonard. We also have National Night Out, which is August 3rd from 6 to 8:30. We hope to see you there. The Franklin Street Bazaar Neighborhood Day. We're going to be out there August 21st from 8:45 to 1 p.m. And there is a new park called NoCo Park. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's kind of a new park that popped up in downtown Evansville. We're kind of looking into getting something going on with that. If anybody has any information, come see me. We have a COVID protocol committee, and I was hoping to get some volunteers for this committee. Last year, we had a once-in-a-lifetime event. COVID happened, and it literally took us, it knocked us off of our feet. We were not prepared for it, just like a lot of other organizations. In order to be prepared for it, in case something happens in the future, we want to be able to activate our volunteers to help the community in that regard. UNOE is mostly a social organization, and we cannot be social during a pandemic. So we'd like to come up with a protocol so that if something were to happen, we can be there for our community. Anyone who would like to be part of that, let me know. Also, Ken Martin with the web has an announcement that there will be on August 4th.
I think they can hear me.
Our viewing audience.
Oh, do I go like this? No.
Just the
Okay.
audio.
All right. Okay, as you know, I'm part of a group working against the onerous 30% water rate increase that the city is trying to put on us. Can we have a round of applause against that? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, the state regulating agency that has the decision on this, the IURC, Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, is having a public hearing on the city's request very quickly in 2 weeks after the announcement. That's really speedy work as these things go. So the city's in a real big hurry to get this rate approved. I won't tell you why I think it is, but they set the hearing for August the 4th at 6 p.m. all the way out at University of Southern Indiana, where there is no public transportation now. And those of us who live in the city, especially people in the heart of the city, who are elderly without cars and other issues, are not going to be able to get out there. So we're protesting that fact. But you will be able to make written comments, either supporting it or opposing it, until August the 13th. And you can dash off a letter and tell them how hard it is to pay your water bill already, that we've had a 77% increase in our water bills since 2016. This increase will put us up to 107% in another 5 years. It's onerous for limited income people, elderly, especially on the heels of COVID when we haven't recovered from that. And now in the city of Evansville, we have a 25% poverty rate. 1 in every 4 of us, it lives at or below the poverty rate. So yeah, I have information on where to write or email your comments and the number and just the process that you go through to either write it down with number 2 pencil on a yellow pad or go online and make a comment. We have to stop this. It is horrible for the community. And in the end, it's going to hurt our viability because who's going to want to move here if the water bills are so high that you can't pay them? And I'll just tell one quick little story. And it's unfortunate that people won't be able to go in person all the way out to USI to tell it. But one of my friends works in a social service agency. And right before COVID hit, when you could go into McDonald's and eat, a young mother and her 6 or 7-year-old daughter who lived in a house with no water. They could not pay all of their bills, so something had to go. She works in a cafeteria at a nursing home, so it's not the fact that she didn't have income, it's the fact that she didn't make enough money to live in Evansville. So they couldn't pay the water bill, it got cut off. The neighbors let them get water from the hose at their house to flush the toilet and wash their clothes. But food was a problem. So every morning they would go to McDonald's, the mother and the little girl, and they'd buy whatever the cheap breakfast is, because at McDonald's you can't use the restroom unless you buy food. So they would buy a cheap breakfast meal, go into the restroom, wash up, so the little girl could go to grade school and the mother could go to work, and they would fill up their water bottles so they would have water to drink all day. In the evening, they did the very same thing. This is how people live in the city because of these water bills, and it's only going to get worse. So I have a few of these, but if you want to take a picture of it on your phone, if you care to, but I would encourage everyone to speak out about this, because I can imagine in just your faces, there are some of you that get water bills that are a problem also.
Thank you, Kim Martin. Appreciate that. I do want to acknowledge that we do have a political candidate here, Noah Robinson.
Say a few words, or we already know where we're.
Just an announcement of what you're running for. And
I'm Noah Robinson, Noah like the art, running for sheriff. I want to give you time, so you guys are running behind. If you want to talk to me after that issue, I wouldn't mind talking to you guys. Stand for what I've done, do it once back. Consistent your inputs, what kind of things like to change the sheriff's office. I've got a few ideas that you're going to like what I have to say. I don't want to monopolize your meeting.
thank you so much. We have any more business to discuss? Yes. If there's objection, we will now adjourn the meeting.
Anybody opposed?
Anybody opposed?
Thank you.
Kim Martin, second.
Anyone opposed? So be it.
So be it.